morning, everyone. My name is Jerome Carslake. I'm Director of the NRSUP. Today's webinar, Harnessing Technology for Compliance Productivity. This is case study examples from Australia's big builds. So that's me, Jerome Carslake. I'm Director of the NRSUP and its many activities. If you're not sure, if you haven't come across this, please take the time to follow us on social media. And we have the pleasure of delivering this webinar, which is a collaboration with ClockSA and Chartered Institute for Transport and Logistics Australia. And we're going to be featuring Select, which will be delving in a tick. So we want to make this as interactive as possible. We've got 40 minutes for questions as we go through. Being hearing from Dan and Nelson, and we'll get to them in a tick, and then question times. So the chat is open and the question box is open, so please throw them in and we'll be able to feed them through. And we'll just grab those points as we go along. So if you haven't ever used Zoom before, I know Nelson was just cursing about the program earlier from getting in. This is our question box here. Chuck them in there and we have a nice sort of record and we can go through and we will answer them as we go along. So, introducing our two panelists for today. G'day, Dan. How you going?
Good, thank you. How are you going?
Good, mate. So, Dan, for some background, he's a seasoned logistics and operations leader with over 16 years of international experience in construction logistics across Australia, UK, Hong Kong, Afghanistan, and Vietnam. Quite the collection there. He's currently serving as the Logistics National Delivery Lead at Select Plant Australia. Daniel specialises in delivering innovative solutions through strategic planning, stakeholder engagement, and technology integration. So we'll be seeing this amazing work coming up in a moment. Joining Dan, we have Nelson. Hey, Dan, Nelson.
Good afternoon, Jerome. Dan, how are you?
Good to see you. Just came in through there. We were a bit concerned for a tick because he wasn't able to get let in. So great to see you. So he works at Select Plant Australia as well. He has a good sort of history of 26 years in logistics service, ranging from oil and gas, fleet management, BP Australia and BOC. So you're certainly moving around some DGs, so you know really good about safe management and logistics. Ranging into food and services, regional Victoria branch, fleet management, RACV towing, roadside services, national fleet management there, and then also working on a number of major projects from compliance management, heavy vehicle industry, with EPH and EBTA, through to a number of major projects like Westgate Tunnel, Sydney Metro, Barangaroo, and so on. So we have two rock stars joining us today. So really looking forward to hearing your case study, guys. Over to you, Dan, to kick us off.
All right, well, thank you very much, Jerome, for hosting us. It's a pleasure to be here and I guess share a little bit around what we do and how we may be able to broader support the industry as a whole. So obviously when we were coming up for a bit of a title for this presentation series, I was really looking at what we could do with technology. Obviously technology is growing and evolving all the time, and that burden around compliance and productivity isn't changing, and if anything it's getting more complex and more complicated as projects evolve, and you know the industries and areas that we operate in are starting to become a lot more constrained. So a little bit of today's flavouring is really looking at what we can do to use technology to drive safety outcomes and increase our productivity. If you want to go to the next slide. So in terms of the agenda, and I appreciate I sort of got roughly 20 minutes to run through this, so I am going to go quite quickly. I'm going to give, well, maybe I'll skip the overview of myself since Jerome did such a stellar job, but I'll give a bit of an overview of what it means to be ClockSA compliant for main contractors, and also what it means for the transport providers. So quick overview of what the requirements are. Then I'm going to give a bit of an overview of what Select Advisory Services does. And then I'm going to really step into our technology platform. And our technology platform sort of branded our logistic management platform. I'm going to give you an overview of what that can do from its core capabilities and how that fits into the principal contractor or the transport operator. As part of that process, I'll flick through some telematics and ANPR cameras and AI cameras that can really help gauge and improve your compliance, as well as that productivity piece of, you know, taking and automating all of your compliance. And they're going to give a very brief overview of some of the projects we've worked on and what some of the, I guess, smarts that we've applied to them projects are. And then I'll wrap up with a quick conclusion. So if we go to the next slide. So Clocks A requirements for a principal contractor. So basically, it's all around identifying and being able to mitigate risk to the local community. And one of the major things that goes with that is having a construction logistic management plan in place that details how you're going to go to work, what your expectations are for your supply chain, and how you're going to manage your compliance and assurance activities associated with that. As part of that process, obviously, you need to procure responsibly. So you need to engage with contractors that are already Clocks A compliant, or at least on that journey and working towards becoming Clocks A compliant. Obviously, as part of the process in your management plan, you need to be looking at your safe haulage routes to site. Once you get inside the site, how you're going to access and egress around that site, making sure you've got safe, stable loading and unloading areas. You need to have a delivery management system so you can schedule and plan and coordinate what's coming into your site. And where required, you need to have qualified site traffic marshals, sort of policing and controlling your access and managing that interface with the public. In addition to that, you've obviously got to perform the compliance checks on the heavy vehicles and drivers to make sure they do meet the Clocks A standard. You have to address any non-compliances that come up, and you need to be proactive in your risk management and your procurement strategies. And then as part of the ongoing and compliance piece is then to be reviewed at least every 6 months by an external auditor who will come in and actually vet what you're saying, what you're doing in your management plan, and you're actually managing the risks and obligations with that. And then obviously if incidents do occur, you're reviewing and you're investigating them and you're looking to learn from them and you're implementing things to prevent reoccurrence in the future. Next slide, please. So for transport operators, very similar, but I guess a bit more ownership on the actual transport activity itself. So it's about having a system and a safe system of work that looks at how you're going to go to work and communicate and coordinate your activities with your drivers and your supply chain. So, things like looking at your safe haulage routes to site, making sure your vehicles are maintained and serviced, making sure your drivers have the correct licenses and they're still valid and compliant for the role that they're doing. And then if you are engaging subcontractors, making sure you're managing them and compliant or ensuring they're compliant with their part of sort of the chain and these obligations. Obviously, you have a duty of care to ensure that your fleet meets the quality and operational standards. You need to support and ensure that the vehicles meet the advanced features of the Clocks A standards, so things like side under protection, class 5 and 6 mirrors, conspicuously markings. Obviously, ensuring you're supporting your drivers, so conducting additional training with your drivers, whether that's COR training, the vulnerable road user training, collecting data. So when any of your vehicles or supply chain have been involved in incidents, you really get into the detail behind them incidents and look to share lessons to prevent reoccurrence. And then the piece around procuring responsibly. So making sure your supply chain are Clocks A accredited or at least working towards that standard. We get to the next slide, please. So a little bit around what we do as a business. So we support a number of projects on their journey to Clocks A compliance. So we can come in and we can help companies write their construction logistic management plans. We can help them work through their COR strategy and management plan of how they're actually going to manage their COR obligations and be compliant to the Clocks A standard. We can help them identify the risks and some suitable mitigation measures associated with them risks. We also have an in-depth knowledge of who plays in sort of certainly the construction heavy haulage space and can help aid with, vetting subcontractors and supply chain and giving some tips on who to procure with based on their experience and their credentials and being able to meet that standard. We're also able to support the site then with its traffic strategies and its management plans, its construction traffic management plans, its ROLs, its CTMPs, its, all the things you need to get a project up and off the ground. And then how do you actually operationalize and make sure that the heavy vehicles that are coming in and out of your site meet the requirements and are fully compliant? Go to the next slide, please. Obviously, to do a lot of this, we use our logistic management platform. So this is a platform that we have built, and it's a single platform that's modularized that basically can do everything we see on the screen. So it can schedule and plan your delivery so you can coordinate what's coming in and out of your site, can manage your people competencies, so your drivers, your workforce competencies, making sure they've got the correct tickets, driver licenses, training courses for the roles they're going to be completing. The plants and forms module does the same thing with the plant. So it's onboarding the plant, whether that's the heavy vehicles or items of plant on your site, to make sure it meets the minimum requirements. So pre-mobilization forms, service and maintenance records, reporting to confirm that it is compliant. The platform will integrate with telematics, so you can start to pull in telematic data as well. So you can then start to report on route compliance, driver behaviors and things like that. We also have the ability to integrate with ANPR cameras and AI cameras, which I'll talk a little bit more later, but that basically helps with that automation process of ensuring the vehicles that are coming to site have been onboarded, that they've gone through the procedure and process to get onto your site, and you know that they're fully compliant. And then the on-site coordination tool really allows you to plan and coordinate what's happening across your site. So if you've got multiple trades, exclusion zones, different activities taking place, you can really plan and coordinate and communicate that to your supply chain. Next slide, please, Jerome. So what I'm going to do now is just very quickly step through the process of how we actually set up the logistic management platform. So the way that basically works is we'll come out to your site, we get a feel and understanding of what your site needs to look like and how it needs to operate day to day. We'll then set up and configure that site with all the day-to-day controls. We work with you to understand what your reporting requirements are and what your compliance standards are, and we build them requirements into the platform. You go to the next slide, please. Once that's done, the platform's up and running. We then work with your supply chain, invite them into the system. We then train them up on how to use the system. And then once they've gone through that process, they can proceed with basically going ahead and booking deliveries and requests to come in and out of your site. The system's really configurable, so you can really tweak and chop and change based on what you need day to day. So all your gates are dynamically managed, open times, delivery durations. You can restrict them by certain vehicle types. You can assign laydown areas to them vehicles. You can assign attendant plant like cranes and forklifts to unload vehicles. And it really gives you that day-to-day operational control over your scheduling activities across your site. If you go to your next slide. Delivery requests, so I touched on this already, but it really captures the information you need to know who's coming in and out of your site, what time they're coming, who the vehicle is, who the driver is, what they're bringing in or out of your site, whether it's hazardous, not hazardous, and the controls and procedures that go along with them deliveries. You're able to coordinate the arrival gates, loading areas, and any unloading methods that you may need, so that's such as that attendant plant, or whether you've got additional requirements like for a lift plan to be in place or loads to be pre-slung. The system really takes that legwork out, so you've got a clear, concise plan of what's happening that day. If you go to the next slide, please, Jerome. This is just a real snapshot to give you a bit of a flavour of some of the reporting. So in real time, you can then start to see which of your deliveries have arrived, time they arrived, duration that they're on site, time they left site. If they've been delayed on site, you can start to see that. So you can start to plan around driver fatigue and what you need to do to support that. And you can also start to see trends and peaks and troughs in the data where you may have periods at site where you're absolutely at congestion or saturation point, and gives you that ability to smooth things out throughout the day to really plan your day-to-day activities. You go to the next slide, please. For transport operators, sort of touched on some of this earlier. So same sort of process. Subcontractor gets enrolled into the system. Once they're enrolled into the system, they register their plant, their drivers into the system. Plan assessor will then come out and review that vehicle and that driver to confirm it's fully compliant. If it meets the minimum standard, signs that driver off, they then get access to come in and out of that site as many times as they need to. Part of that process, obviously, the Clock Say accreditation, that gets signed off. And then they're registered within the system and they can crack on and go about their day-to-day businesses. And we get that data that we need to show, yep, this driver is approved. He's in a compliant vehicle, and we can see everything that they're sort of doing around with telematics. You go to the next slide, please, Jerome. So these are really just some I guess, screenshots, features of the platform. So platform is fully enabled for tablets, web browser, and mobile phone. This is an example of one of the pre-mobilization forms on the screen. So it's a series of questions that we ask the subcontractor to go through and fill in to say, yep, the vehicle meets the minimum standard. They're able to upload photographs to show and demonstrate that the vehicle meets that standard. And we can do this for pre-mobilization forms, risk assessments, weed and seed certificates, operation manuals, service and maintenance. So we capture all that information and we can do a desktop review of it before that vehicle even comes to site to confirm that it meets the standards on paper. And then, as I say, once it arrives on site, we do that physical inspection where we'll issue a QR code to that piece of plant that then allows anybody in the field that's got the app to walk up to that machine, photograph the QR code, and can pull up the records associated with that vehicle and check that it has been pre-mobilized, that it is authorized to be on site. If you go to the next slide, please. Exact same process with the driver. So the driver gets enrolled into the system. The system automatically polices and controls the compliance piece. So you can see on the screen, you've got drivers that are green. These drivers are fully compliant. They've met the minimum requirements in terms of valid driver's license. They've done the required training. They've done everything that they need to be a compliant driver. Yellow is they've been enrolled into the system, but they haven't yet met the minimum requirements. This allows us to manage things like couriers and things that are going to come to the site ad hoc and may not need to be routine and go through the full onboarding process. And then the red are drivers that have been enrolled into the system. They've come 5 times and they are no longer authorized to come because they've exceeded that window of 5 visits. If you go to the next slide, please. Transport operators, so obviously they submit a delivery request to the project. Projects will then review that request, and if they approve it, driver gets a notification or the contractor gets a notification, say, yep, your delivery is good to go. On the day of delivery, the driver would start the journey in their app, and then all of the day-to-day telematics associated with that delivery would pull through onto the platform, and we're able to then report on that to confirm that that vehicle took the correct haul route to site, that there wasn't any COR or breaches around speed or harsh braking or anything like that. When the vehicle arrives on site, a couple of different options with this. We've got the gatekeepers that can manually log vehicles in or out of the site, or we've got the ANPR cameras that will actually check the vehicle, log it in. They'll take some compliance checks, which I'll talk through towards the end of the presentation, what some of them compliance checks are, and then we'll open the gate and let that vehicle into site. All automated, so the gate actually opens or closes, or a boom gate opens and closes based on approved vehicle request being made, and it recognizing that is the vehicle that we said was coming in. Once the vehicle's inside, obviously it goes to the designated loading bay, it gets unloaded or loaded and does its day-to-day job. If there's any forms required to record the delivery, they can fill that in and it all pulls through to that dashboard that I sort of showed you earlier. When the vehicle leaves, exact same thing, either with the cameras or gatekeeper, we can call that vehicle's left our site, which will tell us the time that that vehicle is on site. If you go to the next slide, please, Jerome. This one's really just an image of what the gatekeepers can have. So as I say, it is fully tablet enabled. So the screen, the top right image shows basically the rugged tablet. Very simple for the driver to use. You know, green button logs the delivery in, red button logs the delivery out. All of the details populate through on the spreadsheet, so they can see exactly who the driver was, what they're bringing to site, time they're coming, which loading bay or crane or area on site they're going to. And that's all automated, and the drivers or the gatekeepers get that information straight away. Go to the next slide, please. The AI piece and the ANPR piece. So this is one of our projects down in Victoria. And what we've done there is we've put ANPR cameras in that will link, and there's 2 ways this works. So there's a suite of vehicles that are authorized to enter and exit the compound all the time, and they don't need to have a delivery request or booking. These are generally light vehicles that are, coming in and out constantly. So cameras work by basically reading the number plate, confirming, yep, that's one of the approved vehicles, lets that vehicle in. With our ANPR cameras for heavy vehicles, same thing, but it links to the delivery booking system. So we can see, yep, the request has been made for a delivery. We've approved that request. Vehicle pulls up. Cameras will match that number plate with the delivery request and authorize that vehicle to come into site. So it's removing the need to have gatekeepers and things like that, managing and controlling what comes in and out of the site. We then took this a step further where we've got what we call the AI cameras, where we've got cameras that will actually check what's on the back of the truck. So they'll check the width, the height of the load, and confirm that's within dimension tolerances. And we can link this to the gate to stop the gate opening if it's out of tolerance, or a sound and audio alarm to alert the driver that it is out of tolerance. We can also do things where we've got a lot of routine deliveries and it's the same item, for example, precast tunnel segments. We can teach the camera to look at the load restraint and spot when there are gaps or inadequacies with the load restraint. Now, for this one to work, we need a lot of volume of the same thing being loaded on the same truck. but the cameras can then learn and start to detect when there's not when things haven't been restrained correctly. And the exact same process will not open the gate, will send an alert out so the driver knows he's got to come back out and reconstrain the load. It will also do things like checking whether the vehicle's road registered or not, and we'll check whether tarp covers are closed on spoiled trucks or not. So this is actually active on a number of our sites now, and we've had a lot of success because it removes the need for gatekeepers. You're actually checking 100% of loads from a road register point of view, dimension point of view, tarp cover point of view, and certainly if you've got a lot of the same precast, we'll check them as well. If you go to the next slide, please. So I'm conscious of time and I'm getting close to the end of sort of my allocated time. So I'll wrap up with a bit of a conclusion. So benefits of a process and a system like this is, you're getting greater compliance with heavy vehicle national law and the Clock Safe standard. You will see noticeable improvements in the safety in terms of the managing of the safety of your contractors and supply chain, because they know they're being checked. They know every load is being checked. So it automatically drives that behavior piece. You'll also should see an increase in productivity and on-site resource utilization. So you can start to schedule what your cranes are doing and really drive them to maximize that crane hook analysis or that forklift productivity point, so that your deliveries are constantly coming in seamlessly. They're being unloaded, trucks going back out, next one. You're not getting bottlenecks and congestion on site. Obviously, it naturally improves the safety culture across your transport activities. They understand the requirements. They understand that they're being monitored and being reported on, so they can't dip and dive and hide and do the wrong thing. You've got instant access to real-time data. So you can see straight away any of the telematics, any of the data behind that delivery. It ultimately saves your business costs. I read a paper a few weeks ago that said the average cost of a road incident on the road, I think, was 250 grand. If it's a fatality, I think it was up to $3 million. All of these things help to prevent these sorts of things from occurring, which ultimately saves your business money. You've got that greater visibility, and you're sort of ticking that box for the Clock Safe standard around driving that continual improvement and delivering safety and productivity and efficiency improvements, because the data's there and you're able to tweak and change and chop what you're doing to drive that continual improvement. A couple of key lessons. Obviously, big change to the industry. People need to be trained on the system. They need to be upskilled and supported to do that role, which takes a bit of time. There's also a piece around getting the right culture. So it's not so much around, Big Brother watching the contractors. It's about, we want to work progressively and proactively with you. It's not about hitting people with a stick. It's about driving that continual improvement. So we can spot there's gaps or errors in the way the supply chain are working. We can take them on that journey and work with them to bring them up to standard and to point out things that they may not be observing or understanding themselves. And my last point is really, for this to be successful, you've really got to have an idea of what success is for your business and how are you going to measure that success. So is it an increase in crane hook analysis? Is it a cost saving? Is it less safety incidents? Is it greater productivity? Be clear on them parameters and what you're currently doing and how you want to measure it, and then you'll see the bang for your buck in terms of the investment. I think that might be it from me.
Yep. Thank you.
Awesome.
That was great. Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for taking your time to share that. And we've got a brief chance to grab a few questions. And if we're getting through now, we've got plenty of time at the end after we've heard from Nelson as well. But really good summary. I'd love to have delving in. Just one quick question before I go to some of the questions.
Mm-hmm.
You found, just with the speed of trucks going through gates, checks, balances, passing, is that far more efficient than what it was before you brought all that technology?
Absolutely. So linking it to a gate means obviously you've got to have an approach ramp for the vehicle to be able to pull in and get off the road. But that vehicle then is stationary while the cameras do all that automated checking, which is far quicker than a human coming out, walking around the vehicle and doing that. So, by reading the number plate, it looks up to say, yep, that's a vehicle that we've onboarded. Yes, it's fully compliant because we know it's been inspected. It's pre-mob still in date. Open the gate. We knew it was coming. Versus a person walking around trying to verify, yep, okay, we've got a booking for you. Yes, it's compliant. It's got the side underrun, things like that. So yeah, it's certainly quicker from a productivity point of view. We're getting a lot more vehicle movements because we are automating it. It takes the human error out of it. Yeah.
I guess the other part is it takes the pressure off someone being the face of rejecting that load as well.
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, the way it works, if somebody comes in and they're not compliant, there's an intercom to speak to somebody, and then the project will make the decision what they're going to do with that vehicle. Whether they let it in or not, but you haven't got somebody there face to face that's generally a security guard or a traffic controller. There's typically a subcontractor trying to manage and administer what the principal contractors try to set up. It goes up that level of management by that point because it's already automatically been escalated by the cameras.
Nice. So, question here from Gary: what platform operating system does this application run on?
So it is based on Datascope. So Datascope is the software provider, and Select have the licensing agreement in Australia. So we're the license resellers of that. We have then integrated that platform with a number of ANPR camera providers and also telematic providers to build some of the dashboards in Power BI or Click.
Thanks, Dan. A question here from Kim: common construction truck configurations are the rigid truck with dog trailer. In your observations, what proportion of such trucks are on higher mass limits allowances?
It varies project to project, but projects with bulk earthworks, such as Nelson's, I don't know, Nelson, probably 70-80% of your vehicles would be truck and dogs with higher mass limits. So yeah, it varies project to project, but certainly your bulk earthwork projects like EFBTA that I think Nelson's going to talk to, you'll certainly see a lot more than you would in some of your build projects. So it really depends. But yeah, there's certainly the bulk of the vehicle movements that we tend to find.
Cool. I'll take two more questions before I move on, and it's a good segue setting you up, Nelson. Do I have to have my vehicles accredited under Clocks A if they only come in once a month?
So the technical answer with this is yes. So anything that comes more than 5 times technically should be Clocks A accredited. But we understand that this is a journey and it's an accreditation process, right? So the reality with construction is your supply chain is going to be dynamic and it's going to change through the various stages of the construction build. So you might start off with your bulk earthwork contractors, your excavation, then you're going to move into concrete, then FRP, scaffolding, fit out. So it's going to constantly change. What we would look to see is that you're managing the risk, and certainly your big providers, your big contractors that have got the lion's share of the scope are certainly following that compliance rather than the odd moms and dads and the ad hoc one-off deliveries. It's about getting that's where I would focus on getting your main tier one, your main supply chain onboarded and up to standard. And then once you've got them up to standard, then you'd work through, as a risk protocol almost to get the ones below that standard up to spec. But I mean, reality is Clocks A is a new standard. You got to start somewhere. So starting with, your big contractors, you're going to get more bang for your buck than your ad hoc ones.
Okay. Last question I'll take before I hold the rest over to the next section. From Jody: does the road registration status integrate with the road agency, or
Yes.
is that information entered manually by the operator?
Nope. So it actually looks it up from the road agency. So when the camera comes in, when the truck comes in, the camera reads it and automatically looks up to check that vehicle is road registered. We've set that to do it once a month. So first time that vehicle arrives in a calendar month, it will check the road registration status because there is a fee. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but there is a small fee with doing that every time you look it up. And if you've got the same vehicle coming in, 10 times a day for the whole month, it becomes counterproductive to do that every day and every movement. So we can tweak the protocol around how often you do it, but typically, we do it once a month for each vehicle.
So it really has made life far more efficient and easy for you.
Correct. We don't have to worry about whether a vehicle's road registered or not because the cameras pick that up. The first time it comes into site for that month, it's checked.
Nice. Well, that's great. So thank you so much for that, Dan. We'll come back to you in a tick when we move on to the next part and have a bit more of a discussion. So Nelson, over to you, mate.
No worries. Thanks, Jerome. Good preso, Dan, and good afternoon to everybody that might be on listening at the moment. So I'm going to have a little bit of a discussion today about, I suppose, part of the prior stage of what Dan talked about and the arduous task of onboarding to a major project, generally in the realms of a tier one, but it can be challenging across projects all across the board. So one of the things I think that industry screaming out for and is getting close to this process, I think, is having a national recognised program where that you can go and complete one induction, you can tick all the boxes, integrate that into a platform such as Datascope, and therefore that will carry with you everywhere you go. It'll be like a Gucci handbag, is that it just doesn't leave your side. It's something that's with you forever. So typically at the present moment in our industry, it starts with, as a contractor, you put your expression of interest in, scope of works are issued back to you in regards to what you're doing it for, whether it's haulage works, concrete, excavation works, whatever it may be. Pre-tender submissions put in with a qualifying period, plans put against that scope. You submit what the proposal is to the project. Then from there you get awarded, and then that's when all the fun stuff starts to begin. So package content and scopes presented, which regularly changes during the actual process of onboarding within a project. The final contract is cited and signed. Discussions take place on an addendum drafted to modify or delete entries from the contract. Final scope's done. Everyone goes backwards and forwards, and then eventually you end up with a signature on the bottom of a contract, and away you go. So typically, tier 1 and tier 2 projects over the years have, I suppose, we've presented our own challenges for people to come on board, because there is so many different interpretations of how you are onboarded. So to give you an example, the NELP project at the moment, that the 3 alliances that we're all working on, we have very similar models in how we actually integrate the onboarding, but we're actually all using different types of systems, which that really makes it a challenge along that journey. So do you want to go next slide, please, Jerome? So obviously, what does it mean, and what's potentially coming? Hopefully, as we know, that the Clocks A process is generating a footprint within the industry very quickly. We've seen the starting point of some of our major contractors based in Victoria, Build Group, who now are bronze accredited under Clocks A, with the starting point along their journey. And they're also starting to see now New South Wales Transport adopting the Clocks A position in the rounds of their next set of contracts going out. So we are starting to see this transition change that's coming about, and I still think the industry is still trying to get its feel for essentially how will the actual Clocks A implementation work within the scope of construction across the board. And the idea, I think, is the longer vision, looking into that future ball will show that a Clocks A accreditation in either a silver or a gold status will see you have the ability to be able to basically be fully compliant to a tier 1 or tier 2 project on tender. So you will submit that you are a Clocks A accredited organisation. You have your vehicles vetted, etc., along with the technology base of what Dan's talking about. That will then make the onboarding process very, very seamless, in that information will be transferred straight over into a platform like Datascope, etc. The only things that will probably essentially change with that will be the onboarding of drivers. You may have a different crew of drivers on board with that. Therefore, then you've got one aligned system. You've mastered the Clocks A accreditation, and you're fully compliant to that process. So the platform basically will align the process for delivering a clear set of heavy vehicle standards as well across the industry, which I think it's long overdue. We all have our different interpretations on what needs to be something that's compliant and what needs not to be. The VAU model's been followed since 2018, and that's been well adopted across the industry. But as we well and truly know, that state by state can vary in a lot of different processes. Deliver a standard induction and onboarding program that will be adopted throughout the industry as well. So as we said, this will make the transition that you are a Clocks accredited operator. You will literally tick probably 90% of the boxes on application of tender. Therefore, then you have the ability to use the platforms such as what Select have got through Datascope. You simply have all your systems updated into that. That transfers over to the tier one contractor, and you're basically ticked off. No arduous process at the moment. So compare that to what we have to do now. We run 9 different platforms at EBTA at the moment that all relate to onboarding and inducting drivers and contractors onto the business. So much so we have two different driver onboarding models now for interstate and local carriers. So we have face-to-face driver inductions that take place. We also now have converted that into a version online for drivers to be able to complete a module of that online as well. So all these platforms have to be managed. And this is where the challenge comes into that, a set of standards with an equal playing field for all means that you are in the clock system, you are done, you are uploaded, you are accredited. You're going to be, competing against people that are on an equal playing field with you. Or if you're not, then you don't have the ability to possibly tender maybe down the track. Next slide, please, Jerome. So obviously, as I said, every project has a different approach. Victorian Big Build, the New South Wales government are 2 of the major players in this component at the moment, with key projects running in all different states. And I think the challenges that come along with it too is you're starting to see now a lot of these packages have very large JV consortiums involved. Laing O'Rourke obviously is one of those. In a JV consortium with Simmel. Some of the bigger packages, SRL, you'll see that they'll find that there could be anywhere up to 4, 5, 6, in some cases 7 different construction platforms that are involved in that. A lot of organisations that tend to JV these packages together to help with the delivery, and along with that comes the complexities of onboarding. Further to add, states major government projects, Melbourne and Brisbane Inland Rail, Cross River Rail, Metronet WA, Torrens and Darlington, Clifford Hill Development. All this accounts to a massive amount of work, but between those 8 different consortiums, there's 37 different building construction consortiums in each of those packages. So with all of that coming in play, you can find in some of these circumstances that everyone has their different onboarding protocols. Everyone has their different onboarding packages. And this is where I think the lean-to that we're getting towards the implementation of clocks, incorporating with construction management systems that are in play, such as Datascope and some of the other platforms that are out there, is that it's going to form a formidable package for contractors to get on board and make that process an awful lot seamless for you. Next slide, please, Tyrone. So obviously, as we said, this is a typical process for a general contractor to onboard with EBTA. Induction must be completed, including face-to-face driver. There's now 3 online modules the drivers have to complete now. That includes uploads and includes vetting of driver's licenses, industry cards, all those things like that. Then we've got heavy vehicle plant inspections that will take place, as Dan said, that plant inspectors will come out and assess the vehicles. Records of the vehicles will be inspected, uploaded into the system. We then check for assets to see that they're VAU compliant. Further audits are conducted from there. Contractors are upload compliance paperwork, asset details, registrations, photograph of assets, all those sorts of bits and pieces. So it's a timely exercise to get on board. I think we get to a point in time where, as we said, we've got a package system that's in play that will be able to transfer from project to project. So essentially, you'll have a recognised module number that'll be created for you in your own Damster system or whatever it may be, whether it's Datascope, whatever that may be, and that will follow you around from project to project, which essentially will have all your compliance ticks and everything done in the background of that system. Next slide, please, Jerome. Yeah, so in winding up, obviously, the induction gremlins, can we achieve one source? And the challenges that we have across the journey here is even in general at EBTA, we have 5 different induction platforms within the project, depending on what you are, depending on what you're doing, depending on the tasks involved, whether you're NDD operators, whether you're excavator operators, whatever it may be. The idea is at the end of the day is that let's see if we can push that away from the network and have an integrated system that balances across the network, and most of all is not make it complicated. You do the hard work early, and you have your accreditations done. And speaking with Simone from Build Group, who they got their clocks bronze accreditation done not long ago, is that it wasn't actually a huge amount of work. It was just basically the collation of that data and information required. And then from there, once they achieve their accreditation status, it's like with everything, is that with the updates of everything that you do along the journey, you maintain that accreditation along the journey. Next slide, please, Jerome. So obviously, as we all know, Dan touched on about the scope of the VAU requirements that are reflective of that. A lot of all this is visible to what Clocks A accreditation standards are as well. So the good thing about it is industry is not trying to essentially reinvent too much of the wheel. The VRU, or the vulnerable road user status, is something that has been getting driven hard through construction industry, and along with that, Clocks has adopted all of that model within their program as well. Next slide, please, Dan. So obviously, the standards come in different forms, obviously starting from your bronze to your silver to your gold. So, obviously this is still going to be an ongoing process and a journey along the way. As Dan instigated, is that it's not going to be just a hard, fast rule that if you are not Clocks accredited, that's it, we don't want to know anything about you. That's not going to be the case. This is going to take something that's going to take time to instigate itself within industry. And obviously it is gaining support at state and federal levels. As we said, the implementation of New South Wales have implemented this into their major projects now, which is a terrific starting point. I think we're going to see a lot of this sort of follow on. Next slide, please, Dan. So obviously a little bit of in closing up for you all, a little bit of an idea and instigation of what a lot of the technology base is around. There's obviously different platforms in how things have been done, but a lot of the standards are all the same across the board, which is the ideal scenario behind it. I mean, one of the major projects we did, I've been involved in, and Langs were as well, which was the Sydney Metro works up in New South Wales. And, there was some real smart integration processes put in play up there, with having onboarding tablets in trucks, and, trucks approaching the 3 different tunnel zones. Were given instructions inside the cab on the equipment and pieces involved as to where to go, what tunnel zone to enter, all those sort of things like that. As Dan's talked about, now the AI technology in verifying loads before they leave site, that type of integration is available now to start plugging into weighbridges, all those sort of things like that. So there's a lot of technology in and around the realms of how we can apply all this with the integration of onboarding platforms. We'll make things a lot better for the industry shifting forward. We're going to have more compliant, a lot safer operating vehicles on the road. I think it might even fuel the opportunity for better technology and the updating of heavy vehicles in the industry as well, which means we're going to see the implementation of far better technology employed into these vehicles. Next slide, please, Jerome. And I think we're on the tail end here. So a little bit more photograph of obviously the VRU components of what it's around. And again, this is something that's nothing new to the industry base. As I said, the implementation of the VRU requirements was put in place in 2018 and it's been adopted by all the projects since then. And as we said, the clocks have grabbed hold of that process as well and placed it in the components for the onboarding. And I think that might be the last slide. Are we, Dan, I think? Yeah, we are. There you go, everybody. Thank you. You're on mute, Jerome.
Thanks to the guys. There's a really good flow in how it's sort of moving through the presentation. So really good job there. What I now dive in is I thought this is a question I've saved for both of you together. And please feel free to bounce off each other. This is an anonymous one that came in. How can we ensure that subcontractors will agree with the specs, if not mandated by the government?
Yeah, look, it's a really good point. And I think how we're going to see the cycle of all this change, and I think one thing Dan talked about before is the Clocks A implementation is we're not going to find it's going to be implemented next week. This is going to be something that's going to take a lot of thinking, a lot of background thoughts as to the implications of this being employed into industry. Down here in Victoria at the moment, one of the great things we are working with the MRPV working group at the moment in implementing a technical standardised onboarding process for the major projects where, again, you can go and get ticked off once, and that will allow you to have the ability to be inducted on pretty much all the tier ones. I think then what we'll see is once that's established, New South Wales are also really keen to follow something along the lines of this, and I think you'll find the likes of Queensland will adopt it as well. Then we'll start to see, I think, then the model of clocks that is going to then really take control of those standards. And then the integration of government contracts changing, that's a big process along that journey as well. Yeah.
Any thoughts as well, Dan?
Oh, I mean, I think Nathan summarised it quite nicely that it is a journey. A number of government agencies have now started that journey. So Transport for New South Wales were the first that basically said all contracts from August onwards this year will now have Clocks A mandated as a core requirement. We're obviously Clocks are working alongside the rest of the government agencies to transition that across. Like anything, it takes time, right? And we appreciate it takes time, but the key fundamental drive and attractiveness to clocks from a contractor point of view is that it's a single standard that everybody will comply with. And if we can get that, just think of what that does for the industry as a legacy. So you're constantly then upskilling the industry to a set level. Everybody is competing at the same standard. And then I think you'll get that trickle-on effect that, once all of your major government contractors are doing this, you'll then start to see it trickle down to some of the major players that aren't necessarily government contracts, start to adopt this as an initiative and as a standard. And then collectively, the whole industry moves forward to that process. Clocks is in its infancy. So it is really a new standard. It's going to take some time to get traction. But as I say, the big attraction is standardizing it, creating that level playing field that everybody's working towards.
And Nelson, you made a lot of points in there talking about 9 different programs from onboarding, all these different sort of segments and systems. So there's got to be a cost with all that sort of stuff, wouldn't there be?
Oh, absolutely. It's I think initially we look at it from the very start, and you sort of think, and it might say it's X amount of dollars to get yourself accredited, and for some, it's not going to be for everybody. That's the thing I think to identify is that the challenges of being involved in a tier one organisation now, and Dan and I touch on this quite often, is the level of compliance and scrutiny that we put on our contractors is a lot. We have a very, very stringent and heavy integrated compliance platform that's been built internally within EBTA as such now that we've got some masters in this business. Gil, who has really put some incredible stuff together, and we have what we call is one of the first that we've seen is an immersive room that we built. That is basically a dimensional room that's been built that we can display and present all our compliance checks live on the data screen, and it's all wall interactive. We can go up and select vehicles. We can go and select live data screens, and it's not something that's just in a 6x6 room. This is in a 30 by 30 metre auditorium room that's been built. It's pretty incredible what they've done. But that's something that we've gone and done as a business on our own. And, you look at all the costs associated with all of this, and some of the works that we're doing with MRPV in around the platform of onboarding, we actually got to a point that we measured the costs, and we estimated at this stage in time that the industry costs as of such in downtime and all the sorts of bits and pieces, the people involved we're talking upwards of about 26 to 27 million in costs. And that's just for the NELT project alone in the exercise of onboarding everybody, And to give you an indication, we've inducted over two and a half to nearly 3,000 drivers along the journey. Someone like Spark, for example, has inducted probably double that, right? So you think of every time that journey takes place, then we've got plant inspections, then we've got, all the other stuff that goes along with it. So there is would be a significant cost element to the industry and obviously to contractors along that journey.
Wow.
And I mean, the other point then is the unproductive hours that come with that, right? Taking the truck off the road, taking the driver out of the cab to go and do this training, to go for another set of requirements that are almost identical down the road. That's the bit we've got to change, right, as an industry, because the reality is we've got shortages of haulage drivers. We don't have enough trucks in the country. We're not going to be able to deliver unless we look to standardize and streamline the way we go to work across the board. And this goes bigger than individual companies. And that's where I think clocks can really bring everybody together, because it is industry led. So this is a voice from industry saying, this is what we need to do. This is how we can standardize. This is how we can get the safety benefits, but without all the bureaucracy and all of the red tape that goes with it, and still drive the industry forward, but also create that level playing field where everyone knows that if you want to compete and play in that tier one space, this is the standard you need to meet.
Nice.
Yeah.
And give some peace of mind as well for those, if you're just listening the first time as well. The standards that were mentioned, like the vehicles, the training, all these things that they don't change a lot frequently. Like there's continuous improvement, but there's planning. It's industry friendly, so it'll go through a technical group. And so be reviewed every few years, because there was a few people trying to say, in a month's time it could be different, but there's a whole process that how this works through.
Exactly. Yeah.
Question from Mohammed. Just wondering, what's the process once a vehicle is flagged for non-conformance? Any example you came through?
Do you want to take that? Or do you want me to take that, Nels?
Yeah, go for it.
So I mean, it ultimately depends what was flagged. So if it didn't meet the clock say standards, say it was missing side under protection class 5 or 6 mirrors, then it's a conversation with the contractor to put them on a bit of a management plan to work through that process to get accredited. If it's a legislative breach, it's then investigating what went wrong to end up in that situation and what needs to be done to prevent it reoccurring. So that could be a mass breach. It could be the driver not following the correct route. It's about identifying, and it's not about, hitting the contractor with a stick. It's that continuous improvement, but engaging with them, giving them a voice, understanding the challenges that they face, and then working with them to get them up to that standard. because ultimately you've engaged them. They've got a job to do. You need them. But at the same time, they've also signed up to these requirements because often they get written into the contracts as these are the requirements and standards you need to comply with. So it's just taking them on that journey and bringing them with you. I don't know if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, it's a good points Dan just raised there too. I mean, the challenge we have with this along the journey being in the front face of the project is we actually have a project to deliver. So there's always that timeline balance, and as Dan said, it's about engaging that process with the contractor to achieve that compliance. But the good thing about it is that when you achieve that compliance, you only need to do it once, and then you'll find that it's like the Gucci handbag, travels with you everywhere. So
you're just going to maintain it.
Yeah.
So you don't have to have like a Gucci handbag for every shopping centre you go to, every dinner you're going out to.
Yeah.
One here from Gil. Due to the nature of fractured data sets amongst supply chain systems across a project, particularly in the variety of telematics platforms being used by haulers, for example, is there an appetite as part of the CLOCSA accreditation to have a mechanism in place to make this data more easily available and consistent format for managing contractors to access and ingest?
So, a lot in there to unpack. It's a great question. Ultimately, it's where it needs to go to. I think step one for clocks was to mandate that you needed to have a delivery management system and you needed to have access to telematics. So that means now that anybody that wants to play in the CLOCSA space meets that minimum threshold from a compliance standard. The next stage, which is sort of this revision process as industry catches up and gets up to speed, is then to try down and get to the point where you're formatting that it needs to be API enabled, and then bring that forward that it can be integrated into a centralized dashboard. That's where it's got to go, and I think it will get there. I don't know if Karen's probably not. Well, she's not on the call, right? But yeah, Karen, the CEO of Clocks, would be able to talk more to that. But it's certainly something we have discussed as an industry that we need to standardize that, and we need to be able to access the data. I mean, imagine if that dashboard was available and everyone could see, who are the contractors that are compliant, which ones are engaged, which ones are the contractors we want to be working with.
Karen's responded and said, yes, in the future, it's on board. So I think this is the thing, like you said, Nelson, this is a starting point. It's building, we're moving forward, and Dan sort of made that. It's the vision. This is what the playing around has sort of been established. It's going to continue to evolve over time.
Yeah.
This is a nice, easy question for you both. From Mohammed, are CLOCSA requirements consistent across all Australian states, or do they vary depending on the project or state jurisdiction?
So CLOCSA is standardized across all states, jurisdictions, government entities, projects, etc. And we're trying to push tier one contractors down the same route of just adopt the CLOCSA standard, nothing more, nothing less.
One here from Susie. I was wondering how vehicles are tracked for route compliance.
Do you want me to take that, Nelson, or do you want to take it?
Well, look, at EBTA, obviously we run a platform called Virtual Superintendent, which is basically an app-driven. That's actually on the actual NELP project as such, which is probably one of the first of its kind that an alliance package is used, the same process. And from there, all the data is captured through Virtual Superintendent, vehicles tracked, monitored, and through that process as well.
Yeah. Coming up towards the end, we should be able to squeeze in these last two. And there's Jody's made a nice caution in there around accessing telematics and unintended consequences for responsibility under WHS. So thanks for that, Jody. Just a nice one from Kim, which is out, and then we'll look at closing up. Although many focus on the trucks and driver components of CLOCSA, the logistics plan components are very significant. Would you guys be able to touch on that?
Sure. So, I guess to summarize, it starts with a plan. So by having a plan that details how you're going to manage your obligations, what your go-to-work strategy is, and how you're going to deliver what you set out to. So that plan really sets out, these are your minimum standards, this is how we're going to manage it, this is what we're going to do. Once you've documented that and got agreement inside your own organization, that becomes the Bible of how you go to work. And then you can share that with your supply chain, and it becomes a lot easier to hold people to account because you've got a physical documented process and procedure. So yeah, a lot of work goes into producing them plans. It's not something you do once. They do constantly evolve as the nature of construction evolves. Your site evolves over time. So it is some of the, you're constantly referring to, you're constantly tweaking, but it is your strategy of how you go to work.
Which is right back to that first, I think it's the first, second slide you touched on the construction logistics management plan.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much there, guys. So last thing I'll just close out in 30 seconds. What will be your take home message? So go with you, Dan.
Right. So for me is get involved in the Clock Save program. Come and find out what it's about, how it can be integrated into your project or into your business if you're a transport provider. As I say, it's a platform that is being led by industry for industry. Everyone has a voice, and it is about trying to standardize the way we go to work, and bring the benefits that come with that around productivity and enhanced safety. So that's our ultimate objective. And yeah, keen for people to get involved and help shape it.
Nelson, what would you say?
Yeah, look, I think the quick snapshot for me is that we all know that industry growth is massive in the work that's going on in tier one projects. And with that, a lot of the work that we do is very, very confined. It's in around city, it's in around, the highly populated areas where it is. And, as Dan just mentioned, find a little bit more out about the Clocks A and what it actually represents, because it's not representing a mandate that we're trying to make things difficult in industry. Clocks A is giving the opportunity to streamline a system that's going to make things so much easier for everyone along the journey. But there's also the secondary component of that as well. We're building a model of safer, compliant, and better vehicles traveling on the road every day. We all know from the data, Jerome, that you do through the Monash University side of it, is that vulnerable road user deaths are increasing, if they're not decreasing. It's not an at-fault process. It's an industry change. And I think, once we start to really sort of grapple with this a little bit better, that people get frightened by going, I've got to do all this stuff to my truck and, blah, blah, blah. But the journey's not that big. It's not as bad and ugly as what everyone makes it out to be. That's my take.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan and Nelson. I thought at the Clocks A workshop, you'll get a nice sort of tight segments. This gave you a chance to really expand on it and really sing out to everyone and share your knowledge. So thank you very much for taking the time to present. Thank you to everyone who attended today. And the webinar will be shared with the PowerPoint following it. It should be sent out tomorrow around 11 o'clock. So thank you again very much.
Terrific. Thanks, Jerome. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Nelson. Talk soon.
See you guys.